whose name is Out of the Lake. And it goes right along with this painting right here. She's looking out what's happening around her, and you're going to be looking out I started to say all these people. We'd be here tomorrow if we went over all those people. Originally, I thought I'd do all those people that were moved out of the lake and tell their stories. I can't do it. I've picked out different ones that give a sample of what happened. So, by the way, these case studies were made by the TVA workers, and they came through and they asked lots of questions. And you're going to think some of them were being too nosy. And why'd they ask that? Well, people were going to have to be moved. And some of them weren't rich enough to move. They would have to have assistance. And old people, there would be welfare assistance. There'd be all these different government agencies involved with assistance, financial, physical assistance, and everything. So there's a lot of information in there. A lot of it's nosy. But I want to share it with you. So we're going to go back in time to 1941. What sort of day was it? It was a day like all days, filled with the events that alter and illuminate our times. And you were there. We're in the Towns County Herald. People didn't have Facebook back then, so they wouldn't have known what was going on. But they had the Towns County Herald that came out every Thursday. You raced to the mailbox to get the paper, and it told what was happening. It was exciting news, like who took the preacher for lunch on Sunday, like who went to Murphy on a business trip and why they went. Just exciting stuff like that, or who went hunting. And so, in May the 29th, 1941, there was an article on the front page of the Towns County Herald that said, a dam on Hiwassee River planned, May 1941. In a separate story, the Office of Production Management, realizing the demand for stepping up production in the Tennessee Valley for aluminum, planes, power for defense, industries in the southeast, manganese products, synthetic rubber, gas masks, and other materials of war. Who are we in war with in May 1941?
No.
Nobody. But we're helping the good guys. Has recommended the Bureau of Budget that the TVA be given $42 million with which to build 4 new dams to produce 225,000 kilowatts of power. So why were they doing this? Number one, those poor people in Appalachia don't have electricity. So the government's helping us get electricity. Number two, the Hiwassee River goes into the Tennessee River, that goes to the Ohio River, that goes to the Mississippi River. And there's all kinds of flooding happening everywhere down that way. So we're going to build some dams to solve that problem of all the flooding. Number three, we're helping a war against Germany by doing this stuff here. Engineers say they hope to finish the project within 15 months, May 1941, to finish it in 15 months. There's going to be a lot of workers needed, so go apply to be a worker. July the 17th, 1941, the Senate had met early July. In June, the House of Representatives had met and passed the appropriations bill to build all these dams. In early July, the Senate met and passed, without debate, the money to build the dams. And so, a headquarters was established at Murphy, North Carolina. And William T. Hunt, a Towns County native, was hired to be the head guy, liaison between these local people and the TVA. So our local people weren't dealing face-to-face with a total foreigner. I mean, he's really from here. So I'm sure he alleviated a lot of situations. So in the case files, these are the case files. The TVA kept the case files, and at some point they, in Chattanooga, at some point they transferred all those files to the National Archives. And the National Archives has made them, and Ancestry.com got them from the National Archives, and I got mine on the computer at home from the Ancestry.com. So I've read all that stuff, and my head is spinning. It is spinning. And there's no way that we can go over all those people. Now, these names are not just individuals. It's a family. And families were anywhere from 2 people to 12 people. So if you just counted over that, the number of people affected was a lot more than just that. So I opened up the files, and I came to Clay and Blondie Allen. I never knew her to be called Blondie. She was Blondie. She was 19. They were newlyweds. He was 26. He operates a service station. Oh, by the way, through this, do not take that I'm making fun of anybody, please. I'm not. I'm just sharing stuff, and some of it makes me smile. Some of it's sad. But whatever, I am not in any way making fun or making light of their situations. I mean, they're just regular, ordinary, everyday people. And they're our ancestors, a lot of them. So Clay and Blondie are newlyweds, and he runs a store. And where was it? I don't know, but it's somewhere down in the lake. If I got the files out and looked really close, I could probably figure it out, but no. And so he is moving his business to the Macmillan property at the foot of Young Harris Mountain, which means he's there between the BP and the Citgo where the tiny homes are. That's where he's moving to. If anybody remembers, that used to be the Herman Gribble store. Right. Now you got it figured out? All right, that's where he's moving to. He had 60 acres of land, but 55 of it was below the contour. He contracted with them. Now, you could contract with them. They could contract with you. Just sit down over the table and figure out what they'd offer and what you'd take. Well, they agreed on $1,833. That's not a condemnation. That's not the government taking it. That's the 2 of you sitting down and making a business deal. So they responded. They keep their station looking clean and neat, and they seem capable of making a business that is successful. Now, if you knew Clay Allen, here's what they said about him. He's an energetic young man. He's proven to have a great deal of versatility. He's not entirely satisfied with the settlement, but this is an excellent location, and he thinks he will do well at that location. And he has introduced a new method of moving homes in the area. And his new method was move a house with 4 trucks, 2 going forward and 2 going back. He introduced that. And his income last year was $1,000. He was pretty well off. Here's a letter he actually wrote to the TVA on February the 1st, 1942. TVA, Mr. W.T. Hunt. In regards to your letter of January the 28th, you wanted to know if I needed any building materials or fencing as for that part of material. I do not. I would like to have the REA to run their power line about 600 feet. I had power before I moved, and I think the TVA should be willing to help me get lights as I would, so I could be in civilization again. Yours truly, Clay Allen. P.S. I would like to have the power as soon as possible, as I'm getting a little tired of doing business using a lantern. So they're moving his house. The next house was Harley Anderson. You're good. And so a lot of people remember Harley Anderson. His house, this is not his house. This is his mother's house. But his house was a 4-room structure which is hardly more than a shack in a field. And it's unprotected by trees, it's barren of flowers, and it's surrounded by weeds. What would your house look like if they came today and wrote this up about you? Mr. Anderson was away, but present was his wife and 3 children, and his wife was young and looked so overworked. He is employed by the TVA making 50 cents a day. He does odd jobs and has always been a low-income man. Mrs. Anderson seemed very happy with the thoughts that they would have to move. The family was generally cooperative. They owned 4 acres and they rented 60 acres from his mother. They were paid $481.50 for their little place. Now this is his mother, and the reason I put her down there is she wrote a letter to the TVA, and it breaks my heart to read her letter. November the 15th, 1941. Mr. Hunt, dear sir. They wrote good letters, those people back then. I am still looking for you to come and look. That could have been Miss Anderson right there. I'm still looking for you to come and let it, because it's getting cold here, and I can't read it. It's getting cold, and she's got to move. And if she's got to move, she wants to move when it's good weather. So she's waiting on him to come. Hetty Anderson, Hiawassee, Georgia, Route 1, Box 134. P.S. Please come soon while the weather's good. Then, on April the 3rd, 1941, she wrote another letter to him. And she said, there's a place down here that's not covered by the lake yet, but there's a chimney still standing made of brick. Could you please give me the bricks? She's begging for the bricks. Isn't that sad? All right. This is the Orrin and Ora Barrett house. They were sharecroppers. I learned the difference between a sharecropper and a tenant farmer and all this. I knew what a sharecropper was. I taught Georgia history. I thought sharecroppers were all those people in South Georgia on the big plantations that got freed and worked on the plantation and whatever. These people in the lake, lots of them were sharecroppers. So you paid your rent by giving a third of your crop to the landowner. A third. I know it's a third because one of the sharecroppers was so good of a person, the landowner changed it for him to let it be half. I mean, whatever, they changed it for something so that the worker didn't have to give as much. Whatever, I forgot. So we come to Orrin Barrett. He was a sharecropper. And he was sharecropping 14 acres of land that belonged to Commodore Hilton. And so his property consisted of 1 mare, 1 mule, 1 cow, 3 hogs, and a very few tools. I don't know how you make it on that. They appear to be intelligent, but not overly so. They're all in good health except the oldest, who is an epileptic. He appears to belong to a group of tenants that only stay at a place for a year and then move on. The family has limited resources and will need assistance, so here's your social stuff coming in. However, there's 3 men in the family that's able to do physical labor, so they shouldn't have to have a lot of assistance. All right. So, in the process, there's people living in trailers and, well, I won't say mobile homes, just trailers. This is not in Towns County. They didn't make any pictures of the ones in Towns County, but this is one in Blairsville in a trailer camp. We had the trailer camp here too, but we'll get into that later. All right. So as I was giving these papers out, and I was so proud of myself that I didn't miss anybody, and my eyes were drawn out all during this. And here comes Steve Eller, and he says, "Where's Renzi Eller?" I'll have to go back and look for Renzi Eller, but I know where the Renzi Eller place was, and I always heard of them, and they were run out by the lake. So Renzi's missing on your list. All right. So these are the pictures that they made. They didn't make a picture of every place, but I'll just tell you another one right quick. Glenn Billheimer lived in one of those tourist camps, and a tourist camp before the lake. Glenn Billheimer, he had built his own trailer, and it was furnished with all the modern electrical equipment, but it was not comfortable for his four people family. And they did not take care of the outsides. In other words, they didn't pick up their trash. They just kept it clean inside. And he followed the construction trade. He was a crane operator for the TVA, and he was a carpenter. And last year, his income was $4,000. And about moving, there would be no problem moving these people. And the wife said if it came down to it, they could go to their farm that they owned in South Bend, Indiana. All right, Richard Brown. Richard Brown lived about where Shape Crag and Bug Scuffle are, somewhere right in there. So they went to his house, and it was a 5-room, weatherboarded house. The rooms were all sealed. He had plenty of apple trees, but no flowers. He kept boasting of his good financial status. His wife was 24 years his junior, and living in the house was his older sister. She couldn't read. The education level was not very great. The 7-year-old kid did not go to school because the mother didn't want him walking that far. He had 50 acres with 30 in cultivation, and his income last year was $235. He made that from truck cropping, potatoes, beans, corns, and cabbage. And he also owned 79 acres over on Lower Bell Creek that he sold to the lake for $4,625. And he was cooperative, and he was planning to move to higher ground. This is the Frank Birch house, but as I said, I can't go into every one of them. This is the Howell Cowart house. I just had to copy every picture of every house. This is the Wiley Clower house down on Woods Grove. And here's what they interviewed the family just like they interviewed all the families. And this house was a painted, rambling, one-story frame structure surrounded by shade trees and flowers and shrubs and a well-tended lawn. Interior was inexpensively furnished but well kept. Wasn't they nosy? They were received, the TVA worker was received by the grandmother, the daughter-in-law, and all the children while they're being away working. They seemed intelligent. They appeared to live comfortably, and they maintained a normal relationship in the community. These are the cream of the crop. They appeared desiring to cooperate, but hesitant in discussing having to move. The worker doesn't know if they're not happy about the price or they just take the TVA. The community life, relationships, and friends which these people enjoy in their life cannot be replaced. The youth, initiative, progressiveness, and general characteristics of this family should enable them to make a satisfactory relocation. Mrs. Clower told the worker that they had lived in Wyoming, and if it came to it, they could just go back to Wyoming. Farming, they had plenty of tools and animals. They had everything they needed. And they got $6,806.90 for 36 acres. This is the J.Y. Denton house. And the J.Y. Dentons lived where the fairgrounds is. The fairgrounds was taken for the lake. One reason, they didn't know how high the lake would be in the very beginning. And number two, they had a policy of taking all your land. If you owned part of the land in the lake and part of the land up high, they took all your land. All that land at the fairground is TVA land. The pickleball court's TVA land. Hog Wild is TVA land. The hotel up there is TVA land, believe it or not. All right, so they went to the J.Y. Denton's. Is that the, go back to J.Y. They went to the J.Y. Denton's. They found an attractive frame building in good repair, surrounded by shade trees, flowers, shrubs, and above the average lawn. You know what everybody's lawn looked back in the old days? It was dirt. You swept the lawn. If there was a little sprig of grass, you pulled it up. However, these people have a above the average lawn. Interiors above the average. Both in cost of furnishings and finishings, and the housekeeping was very good. The general appearance of the farm, building, work stock, equipment, and cultivated areas is very good. However, this family does not depend on farming for a living. You know what this family depends on? Who knows? Banking. Mr. Denton worked at the bank, Ms. Denton worked at the bank. The only reason they farmed was to put food on the table. His mother lives on the place. Mr. Denton has not made plans for his mother to live with him, and has no definite plan for her to go. I guess she's sitting there. He was cooperative but independent, and he sold his $61 and 7 people in the family for $3,894.45. Now his mother's place was on the fairgrounds property too. So just so you know what happened to her. Well, she had an old maid school teacher daughter. And the old maid school teacher daughter took her in, built her a little house, and they lived happily. And the mother died a few years later. And the old maid school teacher suddenly found love. There was the A.B. Dye family and the Max England family. The Max England family was living down in Hiawassee, renting, and they were renting the Thomas H. Wood house. And Mr. England wanted to buy that house. And he bought the house and moved it up to where Owl Creek and Mill Creek are at the England place today.
Is that the same original house?
That's the same original house.
Wow.
Yes. It looks nice, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so he didn't have any trouble moving, and he didn't have a lot of time to help him move it because he was busy managing his mother's 400-acre farm with 5 tenants. 400-acre farm with 5 tenants.
Which was up on Hiawassee River.
On Hiawassee River, where all the rich people live. Oh, you'll love this. You'll love this one. Claude Franks. Doug, you ever heard of Claude Franks?
Very much so. Used to know Claude Frank.
Well, here he is. He was a graduate of Wake Forest University. His wife was a graduate of the University of Georgia. They had good education and good health. And he was employed at the high school at $65 a month. He had previously practiced law in Miami, Florida. Following that, he was a professional ball player. Do you know anything about that?
I don't.
He was a professional ball player. Mrs. Frank said apparently ball was more important to him than his law career. And then when his ball career ended, he came to Towns. Well, he's from Towns County. He came back home and got a job at the school. And I think they ended up
White County.
White County.
Moved to Cleveland. His wife was Dr. V.M. Wallace Walter's daughter.
I thought I had how much he got paid, but I might not have. Let me see. No, I don't know what he got paid. Okay, this is the Klein Garrett family house and barn. Wow is right, yeah. This is the Jarrett Gibson. Okay. I want to tell about the Arthur Gibson family. He's on your list there, but he's not up here. He actually lived in Clay County, but he was so close to Towns County, and he moved to Towns County, and he had such an interest in occupation, I'm throwing him in. His income was derived from carpentry, milling, odd jobs, and goldfish sales. Lily bulbs and flowers. He had 3 pools of goldfish that he sold from $3 to $5 each. Since it was such a time-intensive operation tending his fish and bulbs, he didn't have a lot of time to farm. So it's going to be difficult moving him, because they're going to have to find him a place where he can have water and a proper property. So it's going to be difficult. So finally, on March the 25th, 1942, he sold and moved to Home Folks. Some of you know where Home Folks. It's up there where Parker Oil is, at Shake Bragg Road going to Bell Mountain. And so that's where he moved. Okay. So Jarrett Gibson, he's another one that was not really in Towns County, but he lived so close, and when he had to move, he moved to Towns County. So I'm throwing him in there. There's his house. It's a little bit better than the average house. He had 25 acres of cropland, 6 acres of pasture, 2 acres of woodland, and he rents 31 acres in addition of cropland. He has 2 mules and 1 cow and tools, and eight of his 10 children are still at home. Ray, Floyd, Boyd, Manuel, Pearl, Leonard, Bert, Barnett, and Thelma. The Floyd and Boyd are 21 and 19, and they're working for the Utah Construction Company. I don't think that means in Utah. His house is 1.5 story, unfinished frame, surrounded by fruit trees and a little sodded lawn. Oh. Appearance indicates industriousness, but not too much time spent on the general beauty of the place because they're busy. It's part of his grandfather's original 400-acre farm. It doesn't appear that there will be a suitable place in Clay County which meets this family's need. So he ended up moving to Lower Bell Creek. Okay. I don't have anything to say on Herman Green. William Leonard Hall, nice house. And this is the Fred Howell house, and evidently it's being moved because the porch is off. And the Wiley Howell house. And Wiley Howell had an orchard, and they had to move his orchard.
Wow.
There's the TVA guys out inspecting the orchard with him. And
What kind of orchard would it have been?
apples and peaches, and yeah. All right. So there's Paul. Let's see. All right. Paul Kilpatrick was an unusual family. It was one of the few ones that was his, hers, and theirs. He was crippled. He had had blood poisoning in his arm when he was young, and it was entirely useless. He was disabled. It's going to be hard to move him. He's not a farmer. He's a merchant. And his store over on the left is right across from Lower Bell Creek School, which had to go because of the lake. And he got a lot of business from the school. His income last year was $1,000 from that little store. And he didn't even have a whole acre. It's 0.8, and he got $1,510. And he was not too worried. The second time the TV worker came, his wife said, he's out in Canton, North Carolina, looking for a place to buy a store and move her store. And he did. They moved to Canton.
I'm going to stop you for just a second. Your battery died. Your battery died in your microphone.
Talking too much.
on.
Are we good now?
Try now.
Are we? Are we good now? All right. So I just thought it would be interesting for you to know about the people that came out of the lake. Herman Kimsey, the John S. Kimsey on Woods Grove, Leonard Kimsey. There was his house in Transit. Go back. Isn't that cute? Did you see the two trucks going forward and the two? Talk about some coordination. All right. You know this house. You see it every time you go down Denton Strait. It's across from the ball fields, close to the pickleball courts and the entrance into the campground. It's the Charlotte Ho Kimsey house. So you remember I said that the TVA wanted all your land, not just the part that was under the water? Charlotte Ho Kimsey owned quite a bit that was above ground. And he wanted to keep it, just the above ground part. Said no, they had to take it all. His house was where the pickleball court is. So it ended up, he had to move it up to that hill, which was a different tract of land that he owned. Which was a different tract of land that he owned. So that's that house. It's still standing. And the barn, which is falling down around behind there, he had to move the barn so many feet to get it off of TVA land. And so, you know all that land down there that's TVA land? And was his, some of it was his land. He respectfully requested to rent his own land back or lease his own land back from the TVA to farm. They respectfully declined. So, the point of all that was, his was not a negotiated price. His was a condemnation. Condemned in court. He went to Gainesville and protested, but it didn't do any good. So most of them were contract. A few were condemnation.
What did they use for evidence to prove that the land is sold?
Excuse me now?
What do they base it on? I can see a house being condemned.
What did they base your price on? The tax digest and what the land was used for, if it was a good income producing purpose or whatever.
Farming vegetables wouldn't be good.
All right, Wade Kimsey over on Lower Bell Creek. And this is the Paul Ledford house. The Paul Ledford house was about in the vicinity of Ridgecrest Circle on the road, on the main road. The main road was down in there on the lake. Let's see if I'm going too long. Okay, and so Paul Ledford had 20.4 acres that he ended up selling for $6,013.98. Now, growing up, I always heard of Paul Ledford. My grandfather taught Paul Ledford. And how I knew anything about Paul Ledford was that he made the communion wine for Union Hill Methodist Church. They didn't use Welch's grape juice. They used Paul Ledford wine. And his children were well educated. His sons were doing well. One was in New York City in the Marines. One was a radio operator in the Army. And his daughters were well educated and were teaching. He was I forget the word. He was doing good. He was, yeah. But his protest to the TVA was, "You have taken my income. You have taken my income." He negotiated with them and he moved to Toccoa. But my grandfather said he never was happy. He would come back visiting all the time, but he was never happy after having to move. So the TVA, they took all your land. Well, even if it wasn't over the, under the water, well, his above water property was Ridgecrest Circle. That was his. So you're wanting to know how it's a subdivision today. It's a subdivision because in the 1960s the TVA did a survey of their property and declared some of it surplus. Ridgecrest Circle was a surplus. Cedar Cliff was a surplus. They divided them up into lots and auctioned them off. So that's how Ridgecrest Circle and Cedar Cliff became communities. All right. Okay, so go back. There's Paul Ledford and his family. And the article in the newspaper said, it's worth it to beat Hitler, says farmer forced to move. So during all this time, there was patriotism. There was patriotism. The people's blood here is red, white, and blue. And so there was this patriotic thing that we were doing the right thing for a good cause to beat Hitler.
Jerry, he was my great uncle.
My grandfather loved Paul Ledford. Walter Ledford had a filling station. You remember, if you do remember, you remember Walter Ledford's filling station at the entrance to the school, about where Denton's is. So there's Walter Ledford's filling station moving to its new location. And there's his house moving to its new location. And there's Leonard Lockaby's house over on Bell Creek. And there's the Lower Bell Creek School. Okay, so what happened to Lower Bell Creek School? The water was going to take it. So the water was going to take Woods Grove School. The water was going to take Hog Creek School. Did I miss a school? So what to do? The Board of Education met and in its mighty wisdom decided, close them, send them to Hiawassee. Hiawassee was a little school, 2 little buildings full, and here you send all these interlopers in, and so you ended up being really overcrowded. They had some Quonset huts the Army brought in. They had just had a new high school built, so they crowded the high school together and put a couple elementary rooms in there. The old original academy building was still standing. They crowded them into there. And they even crowded some into the courthouse. Did I miss anything, Doug? So it stood that way of overcrowding from 41 to 1956 when they built the modern Hiawassee Elementary, the modern Macedonia Elementary, and added an addition to the Young Harris Elementary and alleviated the overcrowding.
Jerry, I remember that most of the time in the old academy building, you had the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th grade. They had the 4th grade down in the new high school building.
Yeah. Oh,
At that time.
So with all these people down here and all those people up there, the lunchroom was in the girls' dormitory, and so they had busing for lunch.
Bus the elementary kids up to the high school for lunch.
And it wasn't unheard of for high schoolers just to go to town for lunch. All right. Okay, this is the Ted McConnell house. So the first comment they wrote, unwholesome. He started the college, but sickness prevented him from continuing. It's hard to see how an educated man can live in such surroundings. His income last year was $112. He had 40 acres of orchards, cherry, peach, and apple. Mrs. McConnell was seriously ill, and Mr. McConnell was hard to deal with. The land that the house was on was in Mrs. McConnell's name, and he had a plot next to it in his name. And he has debts, big debts that have to be paid. So anything that he gets, he can't use it to relocate because he's got debts. The neighbors say he's mentally below par. The neighbors say he's never succeeded at anything he's ever attempted. The worker said, I'm applying pressure in every possible way, but handicapped by wife's illness and inability to deal with her as the owner of the property. He felt the TVA was picking on him. He felt he was not getting a square deal from the world. To alleviate the situation, a tractor was gotten from Lyle Construction Company. Harry England, the ordinary, ordered up 2 tractors from the county. Robert Chastain donated his labor to supervise, and J.C. Lee and Harry England both volunteered their labor to get rid of him. So they got the house moved.
Is this the one you mentioned last month?
Oh, I think I might have called him an ornery old cuss last time.
What did he name his new place though?
Well, the Dentons across the way were Hills and Dales the Dentons. And his sign said, Bars and Mushrooms the McConnells. I'm not making fun. There's the Edgar Medley place. And Wiley Moody lived on Hog Creek and operated the mill. Now, have you ever been to Helen from this way? At the foot of the mountain, what's that community to the left?
Moody Hall.
Moody Hall. And it is named for Wiley Moody, who lived right here and was frustrated at having to move. And he was telling people, I'm moving to a place that's so high that it'll never be flooded by a lake. And if Moody Hall ever gets flooded by a lake, the rest of us will be flooded too. It was his house now, this is the mill. His house was a weatherboarded structure badly in need of paint, inside and out. Nosy people. There were 8 children, age 18 to 2.5, and 2 have measles. It's not particularly a clean house, probably due to the number of children and meager income. He works for Jeanette Lumber Company and operates a bulldozer for 50 cents an hour. He has 29.3 acres and he got $3,075.71 for it. His income last year was $1,000. And it said, he's not enthusiastic, but it'll probably be no problem moving the family. Besides, they have a lot of grown sons that can be of material aid in the process. The mill that he operated, he didn't charge cash because nobody had cash. He charged a toll, and the toll was what he used to put food on the table. And so he moved to Moody Hall. Okay. Porter Mull's house. Arthur Neal's house. Let's see if I did anything on Arthur Neal. I don't guess I did. Anyhow, Arthur Neal was a renter. I forget who owned the house. It was over on Lower Bell Creek in the lake. But what's that?
Outside stairs.
That's the outside stairs. And you put your stairs to the upstairs on the outside, because if you put them on the inside, it took up unnecessary space and harbored cold air and made you get sick. So you put them on the outside. Okay, there's the Carrie Nichols house. She was one of the few divorced women that they interviewed. She didn't hide it. Her first husband had died in Wyoming or Colorado or somewhere being a sheep herder and got hit by a train. And they brought him back here, and then she married whoever and was divorced from him. Okay, this is the Lawrence McKinley Nichols, L.M. Nichols house. And here's the directions if you want to go. Remember, it's 1941. Turn right at Hiawassee, just past the courthouse. Go 0.4 miles across the river. Turn left and go 1.2 miles. Then leave your car and walk on a dirt road 1/4 mile, forcing your way through a jungle. It's a 4-room house, half log and half box house. And they met Mrs. Nichols and the children working in the fields. She was tall and slender and appeared much overworked. Given the circumstances, she was not a tidy lady. It was a typical poor family, and Lily Woodring Mull was the owner of the property. Mr. Nichols had been working for the state highway at 40 cents an hour and at an acid wood plant for $3 a day. And Mrs. Small sold the property, so they had to get out. Now, the people that got out, they didn't get, if they were renting or sharecropping, they didn't get money because they didn't own it. So Mrs. Small is going to get a bunch of money and they're going to get the boot. They said, Mr. Nichols relocated on unacquired property. I don't know, with permission or non permission, I don't know. And it said where he can provide for his family in the same manner as before. The W.P. Nicholson house on Lower Bell Creek, or Upper Bell, somewhere on Bell. The Burt Penland house down around Cedar Cliff. That had 3 cars. The C.V. Phillips place down at Cedar Cliff. And the house was moved. And it's not anymore. I looked. I think it's gone now. Or fallen down. One. Go back. So he was ornery. He didn't want to do this. He kept putting them off, and he appeared to be cooperative, but then they thought he was being antagonistic. And he could move, and he had a place to move, and he wouldn't move, and he wouldn't tear down his fences. And finally a letter came to him from the U.S. of A. versus him. And to make a long story short, he was one of the few condemned. So Charlton Kimsey, C.V. Phillips, condemned. John B. Russell, that was down on Cedar Cliff. He moved to up near the nursing home. And Ernest Sims. Ernest Sims had 7.9 acres over on Lower Bell Creek, and he sold it for $2,406.60. His house was a 7-room painted house. Painted. Most of them were not painted. Painted house, excellent condition, inside and out, and the family has an above-average education. He was hardly a farmer. He had a 1.5 acre corn crop and 1.5 bean crop. His real means of income was working in construction, where he worked for Daniel Construction, Adams Construction, and Wright Construction, and was hoping to get one of these TVA jobs. His income last year was $2,000. He's been ready to move. He's no problem. He's ready to move. However, it's been delayed because of the moving people have not been carrying out their contracts on time. Plus, there's a quarry in the way that they can't get past to move the house. Anybody know where that quarry might be? You know, Sandra? Yeah, right down, not far from McDonald's toward North Carolina. It's still there. Anyhow, the house finally got moved into Hiawassee overlooking the lake. And since he was busy working and making money all the time, it was his wife who assumed the responsibility for moving. And his income is far above normal. The case closed. Now, when Hardee's came to town, this house was moved to out McDonald's way toward North Carolina, and it's recently been totally revamped. It's a beautiful little house on the right, and I call it Towns County's first mobile home. So it started life on Lower Bell Creek, it came to Hiawassee, and then it went back toward Bell Creek.
The place in town was where Hardee's restaurant is now.
Yes.
That's where that house sat.
Right where Hardee's is.
Before it was moved back down Bell Creek Road.
All right. This is the Clifton Sanders house. I thought it was a cute little house. And this is the Thomas Hamilton Wood house. Thomas Hamilton Wood had died. His widow had moved to Clarksville or Cleveland 1, and it had become the property of Rondell Stroud. And so Rondell Stroud, let's see, where's my notes? I forget. I forgot. Anyhow, it got moved somewhere, I forgot. All right. In Woods Grove, Mr. W.C. Tatham had a mill about where the Ridges Resort is, right in there somewhere. And I know you're not seeing a water wheel. Well, it didn't have a water wheel. It had a horse that went round and round and round. And so he lost his income having to move from the mill. And so this is his house that was moved, and it's on Crooked Creek at Tatham's Ridge. It's still there. I've not gone and looked it up, but I've been assured that it's there. All right, Mr. Tatham. All right. Look in your file here and look on the back page. Is there a back page that has a poem? Okay, look at that poem. There it is. Okay. I don't have mine. Okay, Herschel Withrow was one of the people being affected. And I bet you never heard of Herschel Withrow, have you? He was working for the TVA, and let's see. Well, he was working for the TVA. His wife's name was Lily, and they had a child in high school, and she was working at the bank. Now, the population had grown so much and business had grown so much that the bank had to hire extra people. And Lily Withrow was one of the people they hired. And while she was living here, she wrote a poem. And it says, it was in the Towns County Herald on September the 4th, 1941. A land that hell will promise, with fair prosperity on the bound, comfortable homes with contentment where happiness and plenty are found, where nature bestows her blessings and artistically adorns the place with an unmerited favor of beauty and an easy and elegant grace. The little Hiwassee flowed smoothly, adding wealth and beauty as well. Her swift, rapid currents are needed, sounds forth like a warning knell. Where's that coming from? The war, patriotism. We stand as one for America, ready her call to serve. We give her our best with holy trust and deem it but our love. So all those people that got booted out, they deemed it their love. Yeah. Yet with vain regrets we pause, and with faint beating hearts look back upon the hills, knowing soon we'll have to part. Time-honored old couples are hopeless. A lifetime of memories shattered and spent. Homes built with youthful labor are taken with half-hearted consent. The pains of goodbye remain unknown, for each must pay the price alone of friends and loved ones quickly gone to find a home in some distant beyond. And goodbye it is to these old blue hills. Goodbye to friends we've known so long. Goodbye to hearth and kith and kin. Goodbye so long until we meet again. They lived, the best I could tell from the directions, down River Street before you cross the river. So I've wondered if the Jewel Twiggs house.
I'm thinking that looks to be that house, Jerry.
That's what I'm thinking.
I vaguely remember.
In my mind, that's it. All right, Ross Thomas Wood. He was known as Little Tom Wood, and this was his house. It was in Friendship, Friendship where they were taking everything. You know where our old rec center is? Who owns that land? TVA. You know where the senior citizens building is? Who owns that? TVA. You know where the health department, the daycare is? You know who owns that? TVA. The fairgrounds, TVA. Over on Sunnyside, that park, TVA. I'm not sure if the boat place up here that the city has, if that's not TVA.
It is.
It is? I thought so. Okay, so there you go. So he's in Friendship where they're taking everything. He had 2 acres that he sold for $3,010. He had 2 mules, 2 cows, 2 hogs, and better than average machinery. His income last year was $1,500 plus $750 from the farm. He had a small store and with a soft drink parlor. Soft drink parlor. The worker has at various times found individuals inside the soft drink parlor who apparently were under the influence of liquor. So the worker believes that Mr. Woods received considerable income from that source. And then the house was sold to Harry England, who moved it into the village of Hiawassee. And I've been busy trying to figure out if it's still around and where it is, but I don't know. I wondered if it was Harry and Elon England's house, because he quit being sheriff about that time and became, I don't know. I don't know where it is. He built a new house in Woods Grove, Mr. Wood did, and when the TVA got to surveying just specifically, they found his new house. The porch was on the TVA. So he had to move it again. We had to move his new house. This is Woods Grove School, and the description they gave of it was how wonderful the people cared for that building and took care of it, just as they did the church. Have I got a better picture of the church?
That is the church.
That was the church.
That is the church.
Okay, so they had pride in their church, and they took care of their church, and it was wonderful, and it was evident. This is the church being moved out of the lake, and it's on. So it got in about this place. This is about where the tennis court is at the Ridges. Isn't there a tennis court there? It's about right there, and it got stuck and mired up, and it took about a month to get it moved up. And this is the Woods Grove School. They were proud of their school too, but the school was closed. So January the 9th, 1942, the newspaper says, "We have a new county. Wildlife was on the run from 4,650 acres of timberland. Many a quail was easy marked for the hunter as she left the fields and woods seeking a new home. The rabbits that escaped with their heads will prey upon nearby farms and orchards. We got our share of flea and mice and rats." The area now has the appearance of a county struck by a tornado. Debris, a few shrubs broken by the house movers. A lone chimney speaks of a day when a family lived there. The hillsides are scarred and bare, and roads are just in awful condition. But when the roads are finished, they will be good. They'll be substantial, being built by modern methods. 141 houses had to be moved. About 60 families have left the county, affected directly or indirectly by the building of a dam. And there's such speculation about what the future of the county will be. One thing is pretty certain, and that is 1942 will be a good year. The dam was supposed to have been closed on December the 31st, 1941. However, old Mr. Penland over in Elf was near the point of death. His doctor certified that moving him would cause his death. So they stopped it, and then he died, and then they closed the gates, February the 24th, 1942. Remember, we started May 1941. We're coming to May 1942. Lions Club receives fish for the lake as their community service project that month. They estimated it to take 15 months. Say the government can't move fast. May 1941, May 1942. So, what sort of a day was it? A day like all days, filled with those events that alter and illuminate our times. And you were there.